All right, we're live. Welcome to the Friday Q&A. I'm Mike Winger, pastor in Southern California, here to try to answer your questions about the Bible, why we should believe it, and how to apply it into our lives as Christians. So, in a short way of saying it, helping you learn to think biblically about everything. That's the goal of this ministry. That's the goal of not only the YouTube channel, but the podcast, the website, the existence of Bible Thinker, BibleThinker.org, all that, just to help you learn to think biblically about everything. And the first question today is an anonymous question, but it says, what does it mean to worship God, quote, in spirit and in truth? Now, this is a phrase that most of us who have familiarity with Scripture, we know this phrase, and we know Jesus said it. It's actually in John chapter 4. But here's how I often heard it taught, and this becomes like a preaching point when people want to talk about worship and about how we should worship God or can worship God, that we must worship him in spirit and truth. And the way I've often heard pastors, I'm not saying every pastor does this, I'm just talking about some of my own experiences. The way I've often heard some pastors say it, or teachers say it, is they'll say that worshiping God in spirit, maybe it refers to having a sincere heart before the Lord, and it might refer to intensity of feelings. I think fewer would say that, but some would, that it's like this intensity of feelings. And others would even say that worshiping God in spirit, that part of the equation, spirit and truth, it refers to spiritual gifts and speaking in tongues and that sort of thing. And that you want to incorporate that in your worship, or else you're not worshiping God right. Now, I think, again, a minority will say that, but those are some of the answers that we're going to get. Others will say about truth, what does truth mean? That you have to worship God in spirit and truth. They'll say perhaps that truth is doctrinal accuracy. And I use that term. I know this is not a popular phrase. I think it's the accurate term for it. Doctrinal accuracy, because doctrine means teaching. And it has to do with the things we believe about God, about Jesus, about who he is and what he's done. And so doctrinal accuracy. And others will say truth refers to sincere hearts, kind of like some say spirit refers to sincere hearts. Like, yeah, it means you're being genuine. You're not lying to God. When you worship him and declare, God, you are holy, I love you, I praise you, you mean it. And so there's an integrity there, it's a sincerity, a truthfulness. But what I think often gets missed here is the context of John chapter 4. And that's when you start to unpack, I think, some other sides of this that are pretty neat. So let's look at it in context. Here's the text on your screen. John chapter 4, to just catch you up briefly, because this is 20 questions. It's not a full Bible study on anything. It's just sort of greasing your wheels to get you thinking biblically about everything. So John chapter 4, Jesus goes and he has to pass by Samaria. Now, Samaria is like kind of non-Jewish. I mean, they would not consider themselves Jews, but they would consider themselves the real children of Abraham. And it's super complicated. I won't get into all the details, but there's a rivalry between the Samaritans and the Jews. And the Samaritans claim that the mountain they have, Mount Gerizim, that's the mountain God originally set up, not Jerusalem, and that you're supposed to worship in Mount Gerizim. The Samaritans also had a partial Bible. They stopped after the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, right, of Moses. They stopped their Bible there and didn't have, Psalms, prophets, those sorts of things. At least this is what's commonly understood about them. And this rivalry was existing between them, so that Jesus, at one point in his ministry, he's passing through Samaria and he's on his way to Jerusalem, and they make him go around. They won't let him pass through because they find out that he's doing it as a part of a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they hate Jerusalem, and they're like, no, we're the real thing, Jerusalem's fake. So he's there outside this town, Sychar in Samaria, and there he meets this woman at the well. And they get into a discussion, and Jesus reveals to her that he's at least, if nothing else, he's at least a prophet, because he tells her about her secret life, that he could not know any other way. When she realizes this, she responds in verse 19. The woman says to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet, and our fathers worshipped on this mountain. But you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." So this isn't, it's interesting because it's not stated as a question, it's just stated as a fact. But the fact that she appealed to him as a prophet implies that she wants him to weigh in on this. Hey, since you've revealed that you have information from God, okay, because you have this information about me, about my private life, my marriage, and my current immoral sexual relationship. Now, deal with this issue for me, this big issue between us, the Jew and the Gentile, the Jew and the Samaritan. And Jesus says to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father." Now, some interpret this part Jesus is about to say the spirit and truth thing, but some interpret this part to mean, oh yeah, you could worship anywhere you want. It doesn't matter where you worship. It never did. Jesus isn't even going to get into it with. I saw a commentary, a written commentary, one of the many commentaries that I have like in Logos software. And this one was not good at this point, and it said, yeah, Jesus doesn't want to get into this debate about where's the right place to worship. Well, that's not true, because he later is going to show that the Jews are right and the Samaritans are wrong. What he's saying is he's telling her there's a change coming. There's a future time coming when it's not going to matter whether you're at this mountain or that mountain, because something is about to change. So then let's read on. You worship what you do not know. Okay, this confirms that the Samaritans, yeah, you're wrong. It's not Gerizim. It's not in Samaria. This is not the place. This is not the location. This, however, is the cat. That's Mika. You barely and rarely get to see her. Yeah, so you don't know what you worship. This is not a compliment. This is not Jesus affirming you really worship the real God, you just don't know it. That's not. I know some people would like to spin it that way. This is in response to her question: are we worshiping right? Right? Our fathers worshiped on this mountain, but you guys say Jerusalem is the place, and he's like, hey, there's a time coming when it's not going to be about where you worship. Then he tells them, you don't even know what you worship. You think you're worshiping God, you think you're worshiping Yahweh, but you don't even know God. That's not a compliment. This is him revealing the real nature of a false religious system. And Jesus was not ashamed to do that. He wasn't trying to be ecumenical more than we're required to and supposed to by Scripture's standards. Then he says, we worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. So this would be very insulting to most Samaritans, but Jesus has revealed himself to be authoritative through the prophecy stuff he just did, and he's going to do more. And this is part of the outreach. Part of his outreach to this other religious group, this sort of fake Jews, in a sense, that's kind of what they are, replacements for Jews that are not real, is to tell them that no, it's not about the Samaritans. God will funnel his salvation through the Jewish people. Okay, that's just some background. So there's the Gerizim versus Jerusalem context there. But the hour is coming, and now is here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him, such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Now, the conversation continues. We don't have to keep reading. She talks about the Messiah. Jesus confirms that he is the Messiah, so that's huge. It's absolutely huge. But let's talk about this phrase, spirit and truth. Here's what I think is going on here. I think that the phrase worship in spirit and worship in truth relate to the things that she just asked about, right? Where are we supposed to worship? And are we worshiping the true God? And the answer is, for the Samaritans, no on both counts. So the where is the wrong question, because the hour is coming when the where is going to be wherever you are, because you will be indwelt by the Spirit. You will worship him in spirit, implying, for anybody who's going like, what are you trying to say, Mike? What I'm suggesting here is in spirit implies non-locality, or you become the locality of the worship. The worship's happening right where you are because the Spirit is in you. So in Jerusalem, up until this time, till Jesus' ministry, you need to worship towards Jerusalem or in Jerusalem or at the Temple of Jerusalem, because this is where the Spirit of God rests. This is part of the whole temple theology, right? In Solomon and the temple and the Holy Spirit rests there. God is not confined there, but this is not to contain God, right? Because God is Spirit and he's not containable, not in that sense. But it was to be a funnel through which the worship of God happens through the temple, because the temple ultimately represents Jesus and his sacrifice. And I recommend you check out my Jesus in the Old Testament series if you want more on that. It's amazing, amazing stuff. So the temple's a conduit. But Jesus, when you can worship God and worship in spiritually worship, real worship through the temple. But then Jesus, he sanctifies us. He makes us the new temple. You are the temple of the Spirit, as the scripture tells us. And then we have 1 Corinthians 6:17. He who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. So that now, like, you are worshiping God in spirit, not just because you have good intentions. Those are important, but that's not what spirit means here. In spirit, I think, is mainly referring to You are born again and indwelt with the Holy Spirit. God is seeking people to worship him, who will become the temple of the Spirit and then worship him. And it won't matter where they're at. This is, wish I had more time to talk about it for the sake of the Q&A, but this is amazing that Jesus is saying something earth-shattering and changing about the nature of the temple and really where the temple is. It comes through the Jews. Jerusalem's important. This is where Jesus will die. This is where the promises of God are. You can't separate Jesus from the Old Testament promises, from the Jewish people, and from the even the location of Jerusalem. But the salvation he's bringing is so that you could worship anywhere, so that through the Jews salvation comes. But salvation doesn't come to you through you becoming a Jew, right? You don't have to go to Jerusalem, so to speak, and be part of the temple and part of the religious practices in that sense. You become the temple as part of the new covenant. Beautiful, powerful stuff. So in Spirit, I think is talking, answers her first question. Hey, where are we supposed to worship? Here or there? And he's like, oh no, you're going to be given the Holy Spirit and you will become a place of worship. So it won't matter where you worship. That's powerful. So that means it only comes through Jesus. It only comes through salvation. It only comes by the grace of God. And contrary, you could think of it this way. Jesus could have said, if he was to say the opposite of spirit, it would be flesh. That you have to worship God in flesh. Now, flesh could represent sin, but it can also represent your own efforts and your own works. But we will worship through God's grace, apart from our works, when we receive the gospel and are born again, and God's Spirit indwells us relationally, intimately, personally, knowing us and us knowing him. That's how you'll worship. Doesn't mean spiritual gifts. Doesn't mean you'll speak in tongues. Doesn't mean those things. This is something every believer has. Every worshiper of God has and must have if they're to worship God at all. So there you go. That's interesting, right? And then it doesn't mean intensity of feelings. Although feelings may come alongside this, that's not what it's referring to. It's referring to, being indwelt by the Spirit. So then what does truth refer to? What does it mean to worship God in truth? I'm on John 4:10. Let's zoom down to where we want to be. Here we go. So in spirit and in truth, this probably refers to true doctrine, I think, and true intent. You could say it's both of those, because both of those are super important for us to have. The one that relates the most to the issue between the Samaritans and the Jews is the true doctrine one. So if you look at the text, remember the text gives us hints at what is emphasized with those words. So we look at it and we say, hey, she's asking, where do we worship? Jesus' response is, okay, in spirit you will worship anywhere. But also, you don't even know what you're worshiping. Like, you don't really know God, because they don't have true doctrine about God. They have all sorts of twisted versions of Jewish doctrine, claiming that they're the real people and all this other stuff. So true doctrine is super important. You need to have real knowledge of the real God, and you need to be indwelt by his Holy Spirit. And then these are the ones he wants to worship him. So yeah, now true intent is obviously important too. You can't be fake. But I think the emphasis of this passage is true knowledge of God, which is about knowledge, about what you know about God. Now some would try to separate truths about God with relational knowledge of experiencing knowing God. I don't think you can truly separate these. I think knowing about God and knowing God personally are connected, but they're not identical. But they are connected. You can't, in other words, you can't know wrong things about God, a bunch of wrong things about who God is, and still say you know God. Oh, well, I have wrong theology about who God is, who Jesus is, how he saves us, what about the Bible, all the doctrines of Christianity, but I know God personally. I'd be like, no, you don't. You're deceived. That's why you have to worship God in spirit and truth. There's my thoughts on that.